Welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Today we will practice ordering food.
Let us look at the monitor.
Welcome to the debate. You know, when we walk onto a beautifully constructed movie set, there is this expectation of perfect immersion. You stroll down a replica of a New York City street, the brick facades look perfectly weathered, the corner coffee shop looks inviting, and the lighting is, well, it's exactly right.
Right, it feels incredibly real.
Exactly. But if you try to actually open the door to that coffee shop, you suddenly realize there's no building there. It's just plywood and, scaffolding holding up a very convincing illusion. Today, we are stepping onto a linguistic movie set.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Thanks. We're examining a highly structured, 10-minute conversational simulation designed specifically for intermediate language learners. In this case, a Brazilian learner conversing with an American native speaker about ordering food at a restaurant.
And, like any movie set, educators really have to decide whether that illusion of reality actually helps the learner or if it just creates a false sense of security before they step out into actual traffic.
Yeah, that's exactly the tension we're looking at. This particular curriculum design has an incredibly specific checklist. It aims to improve listening comprehension, vocabulary, and speaking confidence for A2 to B1 level learners, which is that notorious intermediate plateau.
The hardest part to get past, yeah.
Right. So it demands clear, slow speech, the integration of everyday idioms, and it actually mandates a relaxed, two friends having coffee vibe.
Which is quite a list of demands for just casual chat.
It really is. So the central question we are exploring today is, does this highly rule-bound methodology successfully simulate a natural learning environment, or does its reliance on manufactured authenticity ultimately hinder genuine language acquisition? I will argue that this framework perfectly balances essential pedagogical scaffolding with conversational realism, providing exactly the temporary support structures an intermediate learner needs.
And I'll take the opposite stance. I argue that mandating naturalness alongside strict educational checklists creates an inherently contradictory and honestly pretty sterile simulation.
Okay, strong words.
Well, by trying to script spontaneity, I just think this framework completely fails to prepare learners for the messy, unpredictable reality of actual human communication.
Well, to understand why I view this as a masterclass in scaffolding, we really have to look at the mechanics of how it handles new information. If you're listening to this and you've ever tried to learn a second language, you know the exact feeling of freezing up when a native speaker uses a word you don't know.
Oh, absolutely. The deer in headlights look.
Exactly. Your brain just completely stops processing the rest of the sentence. But this methodology tackles that head on. It requires the native speaker to seamlessly introduce target vocabulary, like phrasal verbs, for instance, and then immediately explain or rephrase them in simpler English without breaking the flow of conversation.
Which is a tall order.
It is, but it acts like a linguistic pace car in a motor race.
Wait, explain what you mean by a pace car in this context.
So in a race, a paced car comes out to safely guide the drivers at a manageable speed, right? But it keeps them moving on the track. The native speaker here is doing exactly that.
Okay, I see where you're going.
They are modulating their speed, yes, but more importantly, by providing inline vocabulary support, saying a complex idiom and instantly rephrasing it, they keep that A2B1 learner in the flow.
Right, rather than stopping completely.
Exactly. They don't force the learner to pull over, stop the conversation, open a dictionary, and lose their rhythm. That momentum is vital because it lowers the learner's affective filter.
Right, the psychological wall.
Yes, that wall of anxiety that literally blocks language processing in the brain. Keeping the momentum keeps the filter down.
Look, you're entirely right about the affective filter. Anxiety is the absolute enemy of fluency. But, and this is a big but, doesn't your pace car analogy completely ignore the massive cognitive load this places on the native speaker?
How so?
Well, the framework explicitly demands that the interaction feel like two friends having a relaxed coffee, but a conversation cannot truly resemble a relaxed chat if one of the participants is covertly managing a massive administrative checklist in their head.
I mean, you don't think a good conversational partner naturally adjusts to the person they are speaking with? We do that all the time.
Adjusting your speed is natural, sure, but covertly ensuring you repeat a specific idiom 3 times, instantly rephrasing complex thoughts, tracking the learner's talk time to prevent monologues, and ensuring you hit specific contractions like and weave, that is not a natural adjustment.
It's structured, yes.
It's a hypervigilant teacher in disguise. If I am sitting down for coffee with you and my internal processing power is entirely focused on hitting pedagogical metrics, I am not authentically listening to you. I am managing you.
But management is exactly what an intermediate learner needs. Let's ground this in reality for a second. Imagine our Brazilian learner at a bustling American restaurant. They are trying to order and suddenly they forget the word for napkin or they stumble on a verb conjugation.
Okay, pretty common scenario.
The waiter taps their foot. The line behind them sighs. What happens? Cortisol floods their system.
Right. Panic sets in.
Exactly. When cortisol spikes, the brain's memory retrieval centers essentially shut down. The words are in their head, but they literally cannot access them. This framework is designed to prevent that exact spike. By having the native speaker manage the interaction, it creates a safe harbor where the learner can access what they know without fighting their own neurobiology.
I don't disagree with the biology of stress, but I heavily disagree with the solution here. By forcing the native speaker into this unnatural, hyper-monitoring role, the tone of the conversation inevitably shifts.
You think the learner notices?
Humans are incredibly perceptive. Even a B1 learner can subconsciously detect when a conversation isn't authentic. The microexpressions, the pacing, the lack of genuine spontaneity, it drops the learner into an uncanny valley of conversation.
The uncanny valley, really?
Yes. It looks like real speech, but the underlying mechanics are entirely artificial. Sanitizing the interaction into a perfectly balanced seesaw of curated input prevents the learner from developing the vital skill of actually dealing with conversational ambiguity.
Okay, but if the native speaker's carrying all this cognitive load to keep the conversation smooth, we have to look at what the learner's actually doing. Are they just passively receiving the sanitized language?
Well, they're certainly being led by the hand.
No, the framework orchestrates the learner's behavior beautifully to help them navigate that very ambiguity you mentioned. It explicitly mandates that the Brazilian learner make occasional natural mistakes, and it requires them to use natural conversational fillers.
Ah, yes.
Things like, well, let me think, actually, or you know.
Right. The choreographed stumbling.
You call it choreographed stumbling, but I'd argue it is providing the essential acoustic material of natural thought.
Acoustic material?
Yes! When an intermediate learner is trying to recall vocabulary, their default instinct is often just dead silence. And dead silence kills conversational momentum and spikes their anxiety all over again.
I'll grant that. Silence is awkward.
Right, so by explicitly instructing the use of let me think or, well, the framework is teaching the learner how to buy time naturally. It's building muscle memory.
Muscle memory for hesitating?
Exactly. Just like a musician practices scales so they don't have to think about finger placement during a performance, the learner is practicing how to hesitate like an American so they don't panic when they need a second to think.
But there is a profound difference between teaching a learner the phrase, let me think, and mandating that it be performed as part of a highly constrained 10-minute theatrical arc.
I wouldn't call it theatrical.
It is, though. And that arc is where this methodology truly loses its grip on reality. The framework explicitly requires that the Brazilian learner gradually improves throughout the conversation.
Because it's an educational model. The goal is to demonstrate progress.
But we are talking about a 10-minute interaction. That is not how language acquisition functions on a neurological level.
I think we all know they aren't becoming fluent in 10 minutes.
But the script implies they are. True linguistic improvement, moving from making a mistake to understanding the correction to confidently utilizing that new pronunciation, simply cannot happen in 600 seconds. Neuroplasticity requires time.
Of course it does.
It requires sleep, specifically the REM and slow wave sleep cycles, where the hippocampus actually consolidates short-term linguistic input into long-term memory. You literally have to sleep on it to improve.
Okay, I think you are taking the phrase gradual improvement a bit too literally here.
Am I? If a methodology forces an arc of improvement alongside choreographed hesitations, it operates purely as theater. It offers a false sense of how quickly confidence actually develops.
It's a representation.
It tells the listener, look, this person started out hesitant and 8 minutes later they are fluent and confident. That is not pedagogical scaffolding. It is a dangerous illusion that sets entirely unrealistic expectations. When a real learner doesn't magically improve in 10 minutes, they feel like they failed.
But that completely ignores the psychological function of modeling in education. No, a learner's brain does not biologically rewire itself in 10 minutes. Nobody is claiming that.
The framework is essentially claiming that.
No, educational materials frequently compress time to demonstrate a concept. Think of a cooking show. You don't watch a turkey roast for 4 hours in real time.
Right.
They show you the preparation, they skip to the result, and you understand the process. The gradual improvement modeled here isn't meant to defy neuroscience. It is meant to model a growth mindset.
A growth mindset?
Yes, it shows the listener that it is okay to start a conversation feeling hesitant, to say, I guess, to make a mistake, and then, through the act of simply continuing to converse, to find a rhythm. It models the emotional trajectory of overcoming anxiety.
Okay, but is it an accurate emotional trajectory if the entire environment has been sanitized of anything genuinely emotional?
What do you mean by sanitized?
Because if we look at this compressed timeline and progression, we really have to look at the boundaries placed on the content itself. The rules dictate exactly what can and cannot be talked about.
Well, sure, which brings us to the topic constraints. The framework sets the scenario as ordering food at a restaurant, and it lays out strict negative constraints. No politics, no religion, no controversial topics, and no sensitive subjects.
Nothing real, essentially.
And it demands the speakers maintain a perpetually friendly and positive tone.
Exactly. And by stripping away all complex subjects and enforcing mandatory positivity, it presents a highly sanitized version of human communication. Real conversation, even about something as mundane as ordering food, isn't always perpetually friendly and positive.
But look at the proficiency level we're dealing with. We're talking about A2 to B1. If we introduce complex, nuanced, or controversial topics to an intermediate learner, aren't we risking total lexical overload?
I'm not saying they need to debate foreign policy.
But even minor controversies. When you are at that stage, you simply do not have the vocabulary to debate political ideology or navigate high-stakes social issues. Your brain's processing power is maxed out just trying to conjugate past tense verbs and remember the phrase for sparkling water.
Sure, the vocabulary is limited.
So sticking to ordering food and keeping it positive provides a predictable, real-world script. It allows the learner to focus entirely on pronunciation and structural acquisition without the cognitive overload of defending a complex opinion.
I totally understand the desire to manage cognitive load. I do. But language isn't just a data transfer mechanism where we input sparkling water and output a beverage.
It's communication.
Yes. Language is the tool we use to navigate a messy, unpredictable world. Sometimes the restaurant is out of what you want. Sometimes the waiter mishears you and brings the wrong dish. Sometimes there is a misunderstanding about the bill.
Which are all highly stressful situations.
But they are realistic. True, realistic conversation involves navigating subtle disagreements or, at the very least, dealing with unpredictable subject matter. By making the environment so perfectly safe, transactional, and artificially positive, this model completely strips away the relational aspect of communication.
You can't achieve relational depth until you have transactional confidence, though. You just can't. You can't navigate a misunderstood bill if you don't first possess the basic rote vocabulary to understand numbers and food items. The framework is providing those foundational survival tools.
It's providing the tools to survive a world that doesn't exist.
Oh, come on.
I'm serious. And the framework goes to bizarre lengths to maintain this illusion. Look at the very ending of its instructions. It mandates that the speakers finish naturally without saying thank you for listening or sounding like a formal educational program.
Right, to maintain the immersion.
It wants the illusion of reality so badly that it forbids acknowledging the reality of the medium itself. It insists it isn't a lesson. It insists it's just two friends.
And what's wrong with that?
Because two friends don't sit down, enforce a strict ban on sensitive topics, ensure one person asks exactly the right ratio of follow-up questions, hit their quota of natural contractions, and then seamlessly terminate their friendship 10 minutes later without a formal sign-off.
Okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration.
It's a simulation that values the appearance of naturalness over the messy reality of genuine communication.
I think you are severely underestimating the value of a controlled simulation for someone whose confidence is, frankly, very fragile at this stage. Let's look at the sum of its parts.
Okay, let's look at them.
The precise rules of this methodology, from mandating those specific contractions to ensuring active participation from both sides without long monologues, to introducing idioms and immediately summarizing them, they provide exactly the structured safety net a learner needs.
A highly engineered net.
But a necessary one. The Brazilian learner in this scenario is being given the gift of context. They get to hear clear, slow American English that still utilizes everyday expressions. They get to practice hesitations that sound natural rather than freezing in panic and spiking their cortisol. They get to experience a conversation that has a clear beginning, middle, and end, moving them confidently toward fluency. Scaffolding isn't a trap, it's a ladder. And this methodology builds an incredibly sturdy ladder.
And, while I appreciate the craftsmanship of that ladder, my perspective remains that the inherent contradiction at the heart of this design just cannot be resolved.
The contradiction between structure and flow.
Exactly. You cannot mandate an unscripted, natural, relaxed flow while simultaneously demanding that the speakers rigidly check off pedagogical metrics, covertly slipping in phrasal verbs, mandating choreographed hesitations, and forcing an unrealistic 10-minute arc of neurobiological improvement. It creates an artificial simulation.
But it's an effective simulation.
It may look like a conversation on the surface, but structurally it operates entirely differently. By stripping away unpredictability and mandating perpetual positivity, it trains the learner for a pristine laboratory environment. It completely fails to prepare them for the genuine, unscripted, and often clumsy interactions that characterize actual language use.
Well, what is clear from both of our perspectives is that this methodology perfectly illustrates the deep, inherent complexities of designing educational tools. Trying to capture the chaotic, beautiful reality of human conversation and package it into a consumable, effective learning module is a monumental challenge.
It absolutely is. The tension between structure and spontaneity isn't just an academic problem. It is the fundamental puzzle of all language teaching.
Right.
Every time educators design a curriculum or a framework like this one, they have to decide what parts of reality to keep and what parts to heavily modify or just completely discard for the sake of the learner's immediate survival.
Which brings us right back to our movie set.
Full circle.
When you are trying to teach someone how to navigate a bustling, chaotic city street, do you start them on the plywood set? The place where the lighting is perfect, the traffic is strictly controlled, and every interaction is guaranteed to be positive and predictable?
Or do you recognize that eventually, to truly understand the rhythm of the city, you have to leave the set, step out into the real traffic, and risk getting a little lost?
Exactly. There is clearly much more to explore regarding how we construct language learning materials and the delicate balance we strike between engineered safety and unscripted reality.
Plenty to think about.
Until next time, we leave that for you to decide.